Hello viewers, in this session we are going to learn E. Cummings' poem If Everything Happens That Can't Be Done. E. Cummings was born in 1894 and died in 1962. He was born in Cambridge, Massachusetts, to a liberal parent who encouraged him in early age to develop his creative gifts. Before his father became a Unitarian minister, he taught at Harvard, where Cummings delivered a lecture on modernistic artistic innovations, which fundamentally gave a new direction to his life. In 1917, Cummings volunteered to serve for an ambulance group in France, where he was imprisoned on false grounds for 3 months. It influenced him deeply, which resulted in a witty, absorbing account of his experiences and his first literary attack on fascism in his The Enormous Room, published in 1922. At the end of the First World War, Cummings went to Paris to study art. He came back to New York in 1924, and by the time he was already a celebrity for his contributions like The Enormous Room, published in 1922, and Tulips and Chimneys, published in 1923. Cummings' early poems discovered the chaotic immediacy of sensuous experience. He plays with words and changes the classification of various word groups. He uses adverbs functioning as nouns, and so on. In 1933, he wrote a travel journal, Amy, which focused on the collectivized Soviet Union. His many anthologies of poetry, like From VV 1931, No Thanks 1935, To Skype 1950, 95 Poems 1958, etc., took his formal experiments and his war on the scientific attitude to new extremes. E. Cummings is a well-known poet for breaking every rule in English for his poetry. The present poem, If Everything Happens That Can't Be Done, is one such poem which breaks almost all rules in English language for a reason. Cummings writes incorrectly, completely and totally on purpose. This is an interesting poem to read for fun and enjoyment. The poet makes several experiments with capitalization, punctuation, and other aspects of English language. He takes the advantage of lucidity and elasticity of English. The subject matter of the poem is one of the interesting aspects. It is about rejoicing in love, nature, and youth. It is also about the flexibility and elasticity of English language, while twisting it to say what can't be said despite the fact it can't be said in the first place. In the structural point of view, the poem has 5 stanzas of 9 lines each. Each stanza is loosely developed, and the words, expressions, and language used are the convenience of the poet. The poet does not follow the rules of capitalization, punctuation, and other important aspects of English language. Text of the poem. If everything happens that can't be done, and anything is righter than books could plan, the stupidest teacher will almost guess. With a run, skip around, we go S. There is nothing as something as one. One hasn't a why, or because, or although. And birds know better than books don't grow. Once anything old being everything new. With a what, which, around, we come who, once, every anything, so. So, world is a leaf, so a tree is a bough, and birds sing sweeter than books tell how. So, here is a way, and so your is a my, with a down, up around again fly, forever was never till now. Now, I love you, and you love me, and books are shorter than books can be, deep in the high that does nothing but fall. With a shout, each around we go all. There is somebody calling, who is we. We are anything brighter than even the sun. We are everything greater than books might mean. We are every anything more than believe, with a spin lip, alive. We are alive. We are wonderful. 1 times 1. The poem, if everything happens that can't be done, begins with a paradoxical expression. It begins with if, which is a conditional expression. It means whatever comes next is conditional upon the impossible happenings. The speaker wants us to think that something which seems to be impossible can be done. Here, the speaker becomes more philosophical and tells us that there are many things in the world which seem to be incredible, but when we experience, we do believe. In the next expression, the poet writes, and anything is righter than books could plan. The stupidest teacher will always guess. Here, the poet personifies the books as a credible source of knowledge and wisdom. Teachers depend on books to share knowledge and wisdom. The knowledge imparted by books cannot be ultimate and true always. The world is mysterious and there are so many things yet to be explored. A bad teacher keeps on guessing, whereas a good teacher does something interesting and new for his students to explore the world. In fact, there is nothing in the world. Recognizing one's potential is desirable, but at the same time, one can do so many things alone, whereas some other time one may be helpless alone. The expression, there is nothing as something as one, gives us the sense of oneness and the strength of an individual. In the second stanza, the speaker tells us that education should make an individual a complete one. It is possible only when a perfectionist attitude has been adopted. A learner should get satisfactory answers for all the doubts and queries which come to his mind. There shouldn't be any why, because, or although. The bookish knowledge may not make an individual self-reliant. So, real-time experience along with the know-how of the respective domain will always help an individual to acquire something better in life. In the next expression, the speaker tells us about the old order changes yielding place to new. This is another example of paradox. The poet writes, once anything old being everything new, which means something old gets converted into new. Logically, it is not possible, but it can be interpreted as change is the law of nature. Transformation of all natural things is inevitable. Metaphorically, we can consider that narrator is suggesting one thing which is old and it is going to be transformed into a new one. He is comparing the awesomeness of one to the awesomeness of everything old which is becoming new. The parenthesis that follows the first line of this stanza is very complex to explain. The use of interrogative words like what, which and who, all these three are coming together basically make this expression a complex one. It seems that the narrator has so many doubts and questions in mind. The concluding line of this stanza, once every anything, so makes us remember the earlier expression of this kind. Grammatically, this combination is unacceptable. An English teacher would always prefer to correct this with everything and anything, rather than saying once every anything so. Stanza 3. In the beginning of the third stanza, the poet has repeated the word so for 2 times. This makes us think of the world as rather changeable and magical. One thing can be everything. If a leaf is one thing, then the world representing everything is a leaf. In the parenthesis, the poet again focuses on the practical experiences in the nature and the bookish knowledge that we get. The comparison here is between a bird's song and book's explanation. The speaker is arguing that nature is a lot more brilliant than books could ever capture. This line hints a little more at the meaning of this whole one thing. Here, it seems that this big old crazy world all boils down to oneness. These lines seem to be describing the way that here is a way and your is a mine. However, this line describes flying when we are told that birds can sing sweeter than books describe. So, the birds are flying down, up and around this world where the large becoming small. This is a happy, joyous existence, freed from the constraints of books and from the rules of space and time. The concept of forever seemed to be impossible. Instead, he could be envisioning eternal life in heaven, eternal time on the earth, or an eternal emotion like true love. Stanza 4. The stanza opens with a positive note and a sudden change in the mood of the speaker. Here, we find him in love, and that love is what has made forever seem possible. So, all the books are shut tight and abandoned in this world of forever and oneness. After all, the world around us seems to know far more than the books which tell us about it. But remember, just because books are shut doesn't mean that there isn't knowledge. The speaker just thinks that knowledge is better found in nature and in love than in books itself. First, the speaker says, "We are deep in the high." This doesn't seem to make any sense. We should also consider the fact that how there are 2 lovers in the poem, and we could be this couple. Stanza 5. What a love these two have! It is brighter than even the sun. This line is an example of hyperbole. Being brighter than the sun would be pretty hard to do in real life, as no one would be able to look at the sun straight without some serious damage. But it may not be a usual brightness that this line refers to. It is a brightness of the heart and soul, the power that this couple feels and that all people as part of the one can feel is more powerful and shining than the sun. The we, in turning out to be pretty magnificent. First, it's brighter than the sun, and now it's greater than anything like books could mean. These lines continue this theme of doubting books, like birds, flower birds, and anything. We is better than books. Here, the poet is stating that we is better than any book could mean. This could be taken a few different ways. It could be saying that books can always have multiple meanings, or that being is better than meaning. We think that the poem is suggesting if something can be seen or done in real life, it should be done, and not just read about. Anything you do in life will be better than the text version. Here, the speaker is saying that we are everything and anything more than believe. The word believe is a verb, whereas the poet uses it as a noun. Think about the word believe. It could be religious, or just about having some convictions, or it could be about having certain hope and having faith in yourself and in the world. It can be anything. In this poem, it refers to believing that everything can happen that can't be done. It means something possible may be impossible, something impossible can be made possible. But then you think of we as being more than even the concept of believing. These lines, like the rest of the second section of parenthesis in each stanza, show us dynamic motion. In this case, we are spinning, leaping, and feeling so alive that we have to repeat ourselves. We are still not getting an exact visual here. These lines do a pretty good job describing how the couple in this poem must feel. Various themes in the poem. The theme of education. The theme of education is one of the dominant themes in the poem. The speaker is found to be lacking interest in school and always thinks about reading and writing are important, but books, textbooks, teachers, and school are the ways of making them mundane and torturous. He prefers a kind of learning which allows him to have real-time experiences. He likes to listen to birds and forget reading and writing. The speaker's views about teacher are negative. The theme of man versus the nature. Man versus the nature is an important theme in this poem. The speaker is very particular about a few things. He prefers to go out in the nature than sitting in the classroom. He feels more comfortable in the natural surrounding than in the company of teachers. The speaker thinks that the nature is the supreme power in the world and human beings should make no attempt to surpass her. Since the natural world is amazing, joyous, pleasant, and perfect. The theme of awe and amazement. The elements like awe and amazement form the major theme of this poem. Here, we experience magical transformations. It's hyperbole and glee. Here, love is awesome, and we admire so many aspects presented like this. So, the theme of awe and amazement runs throughout the poem. Theme of love. Towards the end of this poem, we come to know that the speaker is in love. It is quite surprising for the readers because there is a sudden change in the mood of the speaker. The speaker is found to be so happy and pleasant. He loves and is loved by. This feeling gives him the sense that nothing is impossible in this wonderful world. The poem is full of poetic devices like symbolism, imagery, wordplay, etc. The following sections explain all these poetic devices: symbolism, metaphors, and imagery. The poet uses many symbols in various expressions. Natural imagery is frequently used in this poem. In the lines 11 to 13, the poet refers to birds, which means something which is underdeveloped. In the line 19, the poet compares the world to a leaf and a tree to a bow. This is a metaphor having natural phenomenon. The line 20 and 22nd establishes superiority of nature over books by comparing singing act of birds to the act of books. In the line 26, the word fly connects back to the imagery of birds. In the line 37, the sun is one of the main elements that makes nature possible. There are many references to school, books, teacher, etc., which also serve as symbols. Here, school is a prominent symbol throughout the poem. We hear a lot about this whole one thing in this poem, but we never get an explanation of what it actually means. It's up to us to define the one, but one needs to justify. The speaker gives us some hints, some clues. Our best guess is that this one is the same thing as the we. Perhaps this oneness could be the way the world feels to the speaker when he is deeply in love. Wordplay. Like many other poets, E. Cummings loves to play with words, but he has an astonishing knack for it. Not only does he come up with new words, he makes us think new things about old words by simply using them in entirely different ways from what we are used to. He'll take a simple word like something, a word which most people just gloss right over, and explore its meanings and uses in new and fascinating ways. Cummings' poems are about words and how they work and fit together, as much as they are about anything else. And the present poem, If Everything Happens That Can't Be Done, is no exception. The structure of this poem is so tricky to spot. The readers who give this poem a light reading, especially without reading it aloud, might miss out the pattern within it. That would be a crying shame, though, because the pattern and rhythms are the key to unlocking this mysterious poem. Rhyme. In each stanza, the first, fourth, and ninth lines are rhymed. In the second stanza, for example, although, grow, and so are rhymed. Then the fifth and eighth lines are rhymed like the first stanza, guess and yes. Each stanza follows this rhyming pattern. Form and meter. Each stanza follows a roughly iambic meter. This means that the line has an unstressed syllable followed by a stressed syllable, and we call this pair an iamb, which is a type of foot or unit of sound in poetry. It makes a da-dum sound. Unfortunately, this poem isn't all iambs. E. Cummings like to toss in these pesky little things called anapes. An anapes, like an iamb, is a foot or a unit of sound. Except instead of going da dum, an anapest goes da da dum. In this poem, Cummings has a habit of combining iambs and anapes in his lines, making for a fun rhythmical romp. I hope you have enjoyed this poem. See you in the next class. Thank you.